The story is called The Just Right, Perfect Present. It's written by Frances Kennedy, and the illustrations were done by Sheila Aldridge. The story is really about a 50th wedding anniversary. That's a very big celebration. And you can see on the far right up at the top, the author, Frances Kennedy, put her picture in this book sitting right next to her mother, Dorothy. This is really a book about Dorothy. The illustrator, Sheila Aldridge, is from Georgia and has her own website. You see a picture there of the beginning of her web. Find her at SheilaAldridge.com. Sometimes authors travel around and they get to sign the books that young readers are buying or that parents are buying for young readers. In September of 2007, Frances Kennedy, the author, signed this book. And when she signed it, she wrote, "Make yourself promises." So it's kind of a clue that for Frances Kennedy, at least part of this story is all wrapped up in the idea of making yourself a promise and then keeping that promise. At the Phillip family reunion, Donna Deli sat perched in the tip-top of her apple tree. Grandpapa planted the first tree in this orchard on the day he and Grandmama were married, and added another tree each time a new Phillip came along. Today the orchard was full of aunts, uncles, cousins, and apple trees. Donna climbed down as the Phillips began to sort into families. Grandpapa raised his hand, silencing the goodbyes. "Grandmama and I have a favor to ask," said Grandpapa. "When the apple blossoms are gone and the orchard hangs low with fruit, we want you to return to share the joy of our golden wedding anniversary, celebrating 50 years of marriage." Cousin John sidled up to Donna as Grandpapa continued. "And it would make me very proud to hear a grandchild recite a verse for Grandmama on this momentous occasion." "That would be me," said John. "It's going to be difficult to choose the right poem," said Donna, ignoring her cousin. "Don't bother," said John. Maybe the Owl and the Pussycat would work," Donna continued. "The Owl and the Pussycat? You can't be serious," howled John as he jumped into his family's automobile and disappeared in a cloud of dust. Now, some people today still love the Owl and the Pussycat. It's been a popular poem for a long time, and it's got a wonderful rhythm that goes sort of like this. "The Owl and the Pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money wrapped up in a 5-pound note." Late afternoon the next day, Donna finished her chores, found the Owl and the Pussycat in Mama's big poetry book, and declared, "I shall be the one to make Grandpapa proud." Pussy said to the Owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing! Oh, let us be married, too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring?" From that moment on, Donna and the Owl and the Pussycat were never far apart. When Donna mowed the lawn, Pussycat and Owl rode the mower handle. They were in the garden when Donna pulled weeds, and in the hen house when she gathered eggs. The poem appeared everywhere, tacked above the kitchen sink and beneath Donna's pillow. Donna even hid it under her napkin at supper time. That is, until she recited, "And there in a wood a piggy-wig stood," instead of saying, "For every cup and plateful we are truly grateful." Then Papa banned memorizing owls, pussycats, and piggy-wigs from the table. In June, the circus came to town. Donna almost missed Rollo the human cannonball fly across the big top. She had her eyes shut, tight, trying to remember the second word in the second line in the second verse when Hazel and Carlisle shouted, "Look!" just in time. In July, at the county fair, Mama got a blue ribbon for her gooseberry pie, and Donna started on the third verse atop the Ferris wheel. When the letter from Aunt Lottie arrived, Donna was closing in on the last line. And here's what that letter said. Dearest Francie, couldn't wait with the good news. John has memorized The Owl and the Pussycat. Isn't that just the perfect poem? Grandpapa says it will be a splendid anniversary present. See you soon. Love, Lottie. John took your poem, said Carlisle, when Mama finished reading the letter. That isn't fair, said Lois and Hazel together. So what if Cousin John knows the poem by heart? Said Alice. Find another one. Oh, it isn't that easy, said Donna. Even if I found another poem, there's not enough time to memorize it. As Donna cleared the supper dishes, Alice cornered her sisters and brother. Donna has worked too hard to give up now. We need to help her. Lois and Hazel agreed, but Carlisle had to think it over. Finally he said, All right, but just remember, I don't like poems. The next morning, Hazel and Carlisle gathered all of Mama's poetry books and Donna to the front porch swing. Alice, Lois, and Donna opened every book looking for the just right poem. Oh, it wasn't there. The poem was not found in their last year's school books either. So after lunch, they went to the attic and looked through box after dusty box. Hours later, Donna sighed. I told you it would be hard to find the just right perfect poem. Alice took the last book from the last box, and there it was. Now Carlisle brought in the firewood, and Hazel took 2 turns drying dishes so Donna could study. Sundays, Lois prompted Donna on the way to church, and Alice cued her on the way home. Donna studied and studied and studied. When Papa pulled into Grandpapa's farm on the 50th wedding anniversary day, he said, Make Grandpapa and me proud. Donna climbed her apple tree and studied some more. That afternoon, when Grandmama and Grandpapa cut the anniversary cake, Donna climbed down from her apple tree. Everyone had a piece, but Donna wasn't very hungry. Then Grandpapa said, Lottie tells me we have one more treat. It's a good thing you didn't bother, said John to Donna as he bounded toward Grandmama and Grandpapa. But I did, sighed Donna as John went out and recited The Owl and the Pussycat. Everyone congratulated John. Anyone else have a verse for Grandmama? Asked Grandpapa. Donna didn't move. You can do it, whispered Alice. We know you can, whispered Hazel and Lois. Here she is, Grandpapa, said Carlisle, pushing his sister forward. Here is the anyone else. Well, Donna, asked Grandpapa, are you about to make me proud? I'll try, said Donna. She crossed her fingers and said, The Planting of the Apple Tree by William Cullen Bryant. Oh, cried Grandmama. "Do you remember, Grandpapa? You recited that poem on our wedding day, the day we planted our first apple tree." "Come, let us plant the apple tree," began Donna. Taking a deep breath, she continued, reciting 8 verses perfectly. "I've made a few changes in the last lines, Grandpapa," said Donna when she reached the 9th verse. "It takes a mighty brave person to change the words of William Cullen Bryant," laughed Grandpapa, as Donna recited. "Who planted this old apple tree? The children of that distant day. Thus to some Grandmama shall say, and, gazing at its mossy stem, their Grandmama shall say to them, a poet of the land was he, and on our wedding day, in that far-off time, he said to me this quaint old rhyme, and planted me an apple tree." Aunties, uncles, cousins, and distinguished guests shouted and cheered, and Grandpapa said, "I do believe Mr. Bryant would approve of those changes, Donna. I am proud of you." "Very proud indeed," said Papa, handing Donna the piece of cake he had saved just for her. Donna smiled at Cousin John and took a big, sweet bite. On the left side of this page, you can see all 9 verses from the very famous poem, The Planting of the Apple Tree. This was written by William Cullen Bryant in the 1800s, when America was still a new and young nation. William Cullen Bryant lived in Massachusetts, and he was well loved by readers of his time, and he's still read today. On the right, you see a picture of the author's family, and she explains in this page how her family really did have poetry as one of the things that they used for family get-togethers and celebrations. Different members of the family would take turns doing recitations of poetry. Frances talks about her own grandparents, but she says about her mother, "Donna was our family's poet laureate." So this story is really her mother's story, and the character called Donna in the story is her mother. The end. A story about a girl who promised herself that she could make her grandpapa proud and make her grandmama cry and smile at the same time on her 50th wedding anniversary. This story has been the just right, perfect present. And it was written by Frances Kennedy, and it was illustrated by Sheila Aldridge.